Hi, this is Mitchell Hudson again, and I'd like to talk about using HTML and CSS today. And the subject is absolute position, okay? The absolute position property lets you position an element within a page by using coordinates instead of using the relative positioning system where the object is positioned based on where other elements on the page are or how the page wants to position it. Using absolute position, you can set the exact coordinate for something. So you can say you will be 100 pixels from the top and 300 pixels from the left or something. So let's give it a try. I have a folder here on my desktop, and I put an image in here of some grass. It's just a picture. It looks like this, and I'm going to use that for my examples, okay? So I'm going to use Coda as my HTML editor today, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm going to make a new Coda document and save it to the folder here where my grass is located, and I'll call this example number 1.html. And using Coda's clips option here, the clips palette, I'm going to get the minimum page structure there. So I just have my HTML tag, my head, my body tag, my title tag. You can just type this in, and you can use any HTML editor that you like. And this is what I'm using, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is inside the body tag here, I will create an image tag, okay? And then I'll set the source equal to, and you can see here that my file in my folder is called grass.jpg. So I'll name this grass.jpg. And I'll check the, I'm in OS 10, so I'll use this this little info box here to give me the dimensions of 259 by 194. So I'll type in, width equals 259, height equals 194, and then I'll close off my tag. So there we go. I have a basic, image tag in my page, and when I preview, there it is. And I can use the name of the file here because it's in the same folder with this HTML file. Okay, if it was in another folder, you would need to include the path, right? So I'll put a title there, okay? So our next step is to position this image wherever we want it on the page, okay? So the first thing I'm going to do to that end is I'm going to create a style tag. And you could put your styles in another document if you like, but for this example, I'm going to place them in the head of the document so the whole thing is together and we can view it all on the page at the same time. So I'm going to create a style tag. I'll set the type to text CSS, and then I'll type my CSS styles within this tag. Okay. Now, we could give this image tag a class or an ID name, right? But since it's the only thing on the page, and just to keep things simple, I'll use the tag name of image. If we had other images on the page, we would really have to use an ID or a class name, okay? But for this example, I can just use image because it's the only image that I have. So image, what are we going to do with you? Well, first things first. Let's give this a quick test here in the browser. I'm just previewing in Coda, but it would look the same in Firefox or Safari. You can see here, like when I move the size of the window, the browser frame, that the image doesn't move and it's kind of stuck in the upper left corner. Okay? And that's because it's the only thing on the page, and so the browser prints it or displays it or draws it in the upper left. What if we wanted to move it though? Okay, So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to the image tag. I'm going to make a selector to style it. And then in the style, I'm going to say position absolute. And you can see the position property has a few choices. You can do absolute, fixed, inherit, relative, and static. Okay? We'll talk about absolute and relative. These are probably the two most useful options here. Okay? I'm going to start with absolute. So the image is absolutely positioned. Okay? So now when I test my page, it basically looks the same. Okay? But in this case, there's a difference. Okay? When an element is absolutely positioned, you can also use the other position properties of top, left, right, and bottom. And when you're using these, you're basically setting the distance from the edge that you name to the edge of the browser. So, for example, if I set the top to 100 pixels, what I'm saying is that the top of this image should be 100 pixels from the top edge of the browser. So you can see here, there's 100 pixels there now. Okay, so I basically told my image to move down 100 pixels. Okay, and what if I went in here and I said, left of 100 pixels? I'll test it again. Hey, I got 100 pixels at the top, 100 pixels on the left. There's actually a little more here because the browser has an extra 10 pixels of margin. So, this is 100 pixels, with that extra 10, I think. But anyway, you can see that my guy doesn't move at all either. He's always just fixed in that position. Okay, this is actually different from fixed. I shouldn't use the term fixed, but he's kind of stuck there. Okay, but he's absolutely positioned, right? I can set the positioning. Let's try it just for fun. What if I set the top to only 50? Now you can see it's only 50 pixels here and 100 on the left. Okay. If I wanted to position my object somewhere else, I can just change these numbers. You can also use right and bottom. I like the top left because it's relative to this upper left corner. It's kind of like this corner is 50 and 100, and I don't know, just working off the top left of the element is kind of easier for me to understand. So I prefer using these two. Okay. So what happens next? Well, a lot of times what you would want to do is you would actually have your image tag inside of another tag like a div. So I'll make a div here and I'll move my image inside of this div. Okay, let's give our div a border just so we can see it. Okay, I'll give it a height and width also so that we can see a box that will be the same dimensions as our image. So I'll say width 259, height 194 pixels, and then I'll give it a border 1 pixel solid red. Okay? And there's my box there. And normally, this image would be inside the div. But what's happening here is that the div is in the correct position. The image has been absolutely positioned, so it breaks the normal positioning rules and then moves itself outside of that system. Okay? Now, you may think that the image is moving relative to the box. In other words, it's 100, to the left and 50 down from the top edge of the red box. That's only because the red box is also starting from the same spot. If the red box was in another position, this image would not follow it. Let's test that. So to position the box in the center of the page, what you would do is you would give it a margin on left and right of auto. I'll actually just set all the margins to auto, right? So if it's got left and right margin of auto and a physical width, the box will center itself on the page. Let's test that, right? So there's my box. It's centered on the page. The image, though, is absolute. 100 from the left, 50 from the top. And if I change the width of the page, you can see the box centers itself, but the image does not change. So what do we do with that? That's a little bit strange there, okay? So how do we get this box to be, the image to stay with the box? I mean, really what we want to do is we want to use absolute position to position an element, based on its container, right? So, for example, if I like this red box, but I wanted to place this image, in a position that was, offset from the position of the box, that becomes really useful for design. Just positioning this at 150 is not quite as useful, okay? Imagine if you had a column that was centered on the page and you wanted to put this inside the column at a specific location. That doesn't work if it's, if it doesn't change when the width of the browser changes, right? So, let's fix that, okay? So here's what we're going to do. I'll go back to my HTML here, and the trick here is that when an element is absolutely positioned, this is the important part here, okay? When an element is absolutely positioned, it's positioned relative to its relative parent, okay? So what's happening here is I don't have a relative parent, so the only parent that I have, the relative parent in this case, ends up being the body tag, okay? So I'm being positioned absolutely relative to the body tag. That means that my box is 50 from the top and 100 from the left of the body tag, okay? If I want to be 50 from the top and 100 from the left of the div tag, then the div tag needs to be relative. And in our case, the div tag is a parent to the image tag because the image tag is nested inside of the div. So that's the reason why this works. If the image tag was not inside the div, then making the div relative would have no effect on the image. So the relative parent is going to affect the absolute child as setting its home or root location, okay? In our case, the root location for us is the upper left corner here, and since we don't have a relative parent, our relative parent becomes the body tag. Okay, so let's change this now. I'll leave this alone, absolute image tag. The div tag, though, I will add position relative. So now that the div, the parent of the image tag, is relative, we will be absolutely positioned based on the upper left corner or the position of the div, okay? Because that's our relative parent. Let's take a look. Oh, look. The div is here. It positions itself based on the auto margins, so the margins are equal left and right. That centers the box. But the image tag now is positioning itself absolutely based on the upper left corner here of its relative parent. So we're 50 down and 100 over, right? And what's nice about this is now when I change the size of my browser, or if anything in here affects the positioning of the div tag, the image follows along, okay? So that's a really important concept there. We can get a lot of mileage out of that, especially when we start working with JavaScript and setting the position of elements based on a JavaScript, okay? So basically the rule there is we're absolutely positioned based on the position of the relative parent object. So if you don't have any relative parents, then it's the body tag, okay?